I want to call this school committee meeting, January 18th, 2024, to order. Yeah, all those who are able and willing, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to start the night with committee comments. We'll start down Karen's side today.
Yay. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Dulett and his team. I went to a film screening last week for his Digital Media 1 and 2 and Media Lab classes. So my son is in that class. So they were doing just a sampling of some of the different works that they did, and it was down in the actual studio, so it was cool to be in there. And I don't know, it was like when you go to any of the art exhibits, you're just amazed at how good these kids are and how lucky we are to have these programs and how lucky we are to have Mr. Dulett to run them. So I don't know if they're available on YouTube or if you can see any of them, but they were really worth checking out. So kudos to that program.
Did you have something you didn't say last week that you were going to say?
That was it.
That was it?
Yeah.
Okay. John?
The only thing I really wanted to mention was, I attended the parent-teacher conferences last week, and there were a ton of people here, and I thought the turnout was great, and teachers were great as well. Just very good conversations. So just wanted to share that.
Awesome. I got nothing.
And Noel?
I actually do have something. So the band, we are doing a fundraiser on SnapRaise, and we have now made $11,526, which is very nice because it will help offset the cost of this amazing trip that we are going on. It is midterms week. We are almost done with midterms, which I'm very happy about. The Model UN trip is coming up soon. February 1st is when we leave, and Q2 ends next week. And also, I think, as you all know, Yonder will be starting next week. But Mr. Kohut has actually, I think he's made, changes, and he's taken in some, comments that people have said. So I'm very excited to see what he has changed and updated on that.
So you don't know what that is?
No. I mean, we might know, but I don't know personally.
Well, I know I was away last week, and I woke up and thought, how did it go with the rollout? I didn't know there was an accident. So I was texting from the pool, do we need to talk? I thought it had rolled out, but I didn't know there was...
From the pool.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a car accident. So, yeah, we'll see how that...
I just wanted to quickly say congratulations to Ms. Sanborn, Mr. Norcom, and Mr. Knowles. It's exciting that they announced the Swampscott Elementary School team, and it's going to be great.
We're diving in. Scheduling.
I'm excited. Did you take the three of them over there?
They will be... There's a multi-step plan. So they will get over there as soon as possible. But I am actually meeting with Ms. Sanborn tomorrow. Then I'll be meeting with Ms. Sanborn, Mr. Knowles, and Mr. Norcom. And then actually we had a meeting today with SMI, who's going to help and assist with their consultants we've been working with, and they're going to assist with the transition of the 3 schools into one. So they'll be working with the principals to guide that transition and make sure all the voices are heard of the families and the students. So that takes that piece off me, because I've been so focused on the teachers and the educators that to be able to give that same attention to the families is going to be fantastic.
Have you heard any feedback about the 3 school council?
I know it's gone well. Ms. Sanborn and Mrs. Longan have been running it, and they did a great presentation. They're all working on their needs assessment surveys to go out. And so Ms. Sanborn and I have a lengthy meeting tomorrow to get caught up to speed. But everybody, it's ready to go. The union's ready to talk about duty coverage and work on that schedule together with everybody in the same building. So it's really exciting. But I do want to get the 3 administrators over there maybe next week if I can.
I know a couple weeks ago I passed on a document that had the gym and the outdoor play areas and the cafeteria, capacities of all those spaces, so that they could start thinking about what playground and recess time.
Well, we
could look
saw
like,
that
and-
the other night at the school
Yeah,
building
but
committee
I
meeting.
had passed that along a couple weeks ago to the team that
good.
was, the team that was trying to start the transition
good.
for scheduling. Yeah, it was kind of,
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I think the school building committee meeting Tuesday night, where you started to see the outdoor play areas, the numbers, the structures, it's going to give them actually something to work from. And actually, Susan McCann and I had a meeting scheduled today that got moved to next Wednesday, where we are going to start identifying teachers' classrooms and labeling the classrooms and talk about the furniture. And I also know that Mrs. Raymond has met with the elementary people, the folks, the leaders, to talk about where those spaces are going to be, because keep in mind, we have 8 sections of first grade right now, which would have to be 8 sections of second grade next year. So moving one of the special education classrooms, we're already looking at that, but we will be labeling teachers in classrooms as early as next week. Because March, we're doing visiting days, and the teachers are going to go over there in small groups to see it. So it is moving right along.
Can you talk a little bit about the SMI consultants? who they are?
I know I'm going to have to think of that acronym, and I can't think of it. Dr. Bacon brought them in, and they have helped us. They're a group that works with DESE, and they have helped us with our family engagement work. And that's the work they've really led through Dr. Bacon. And as part of that family engagement work, it was, have they done enough work with us, or can we use them to utilize for something else? We had 2 areas we were going to focus on, and that was positive home visits and building relationships that way and getting family engagement. Or the second option was to really focus on bringing these 3 schools together. And it's not that they're going to do it, it's that they're going to ask the questions to the leadership team to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the families and the students and really anticipating that work. So it's all part of family engagement. It's in part of making parents and families as partners in decision-making, and it ties right into our school council work. So we're excited. We laid a foundation today. They're coming back with a proposal, but that is a large group. That school council is about 18, because we were trying to give 6, 6, and 6. And but the voices are being heard, and the presentation that they developed based on my presentation of the district strategy, what our work is, what we're looking towards. All of the schools are working on their needs assessment surveys, and they're all on track with their school councils, and it feels good for the first time in several years. So,
Do you think they'll stay with 18 people on a school council? That seems like a
no,
lot.
this is just to
Okay.
give equal voice to the 3 schools right now. Once we get to that full elementary school, I anticipate.
the 18 isn't 18 parents.
No.
The 18 is like 3 parents from each school, plus 3 teachers from each school.
Oh,
Plus the
Plus the
right.
administrator,
Okay.
plus,
So it's 6, 6, and
Okay.
6.
so it's not like,
That's not as unwieldy
And,
as
it,
I thought.
and it's
Yeah.
truthfully, I anticipate this being for 2 years, but you're going to take away 2 administrators from Blaney right away, and then I expect it to get much more manageable, maybe 8 to 10 people. But it was really about equal voice and equal, it has to be the same number of educators as it is parents. So it's 6, 6, and 6. So yeah, we're really excited. But if the administrators have said, okay, it feels official now, and they'll let the work begin, dive in.
yeah, feels official.
It
All right.
does.
All right, so for reports and discussions, I think if no one has any objection, I'd like to move the superintendent's report under the director of finances report, so that we can start to have a budget update first while everyone's fresh and people might be attending this meeting, and then go on to hear your report, if that's okay.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, that would be great. And I appreciate, so last week we had a sort of a roundtable discussion where we were sort of introduced to the budget a little less formally. And so tonight will be a little more formal presentation from our Director of Finance.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
So just kind of what we're going to go over tonight, just a broad overview of our budget process and our timeline, just a review of, where the budget started and what went into it. Then the actual budget itself, a little bit about special education and circuit breaker. Again, go over net school spending, talk about the district goals and priorities, as well as discuss enrollment, IEP, staffing analysis, what is SPS today and what does the district look like, and then leave time for any questions or comments, but of course, certainly ask them as we go through the presentation as well too. So just to take a step back and really kind of talk through what was our process this year and timeline. We discussed this a little bit, but it really started back in September with redesigning this budget book and thinking a little bit differently about how we wanted to approach the budget this year. We distributed the budget memo to the entire leadership team October 20th. And then at that point, I met with them to talk through kind of how we were going to do the budget this year, what the expectations were from the leadership team. Those budgets were due back from the leadership team on November 10th. And then at that point is when a lot of meetings happened with a lot of different groups, some of the same people, different mixes of people, where we really talked about with the leadership team, like, every position, where can we find efficiencies, what are the needs, what are we looking to do with this budget. There was just truly a lot of good teamwork that happened all throughout November and December. Not only did it include speaking with leadership, but also the union as well too. It was really nice to have them as a partner in this entire process with us. We distributed the high-level summary to the school committee on December 11th. The full budget book went out to the committee on the 21st, and then our first review was last week. So as far as what we have coming up for next steps, which is certainly up for discussion, but we have the presentation tonight, potential vote, public hearing vote next week, January 25th. And then at some point, scheduling a presentation with the Finance Committee. That's your typical kind of schedule of things, and typically we present to Finance Committee in March, but certainly if the school committee wants to do something different this year, as far as timing or whether it's a joint meeting or not, that's obviously up for discussion. So just taking a really kind of step back, when we initially put this budget together, the initial requests that came in totaled $33,171,873, or a 7% increase over FY24. And through all those meetings and discussions, the actual increase, or the actual superintendent's proposed budget is $32,444,554, or a 4.6% increase. So, there was, as you can see, we were able to gain some efficiencies with this. As we talked about, this was hard to adhere to the town financial policy because of the rising costs, the costs in the new elementary school, and, as we talked about, the ESSER funds expiring. We started our budget discussions at Tri-Chair starting September 26th, and those went all through October and November and December. A large part of those conversations were talking about how the school was not going to be able to adhere to that financial policy without discussing some other alternative solutions. We talked with them about our special education costs at length and how those costs truly outpace the guideline that we're typically given year over year. And in those meetings, we really did have a commitment from the town administrator to look at special education costs and how to fund that and budget for that differently. As we discussed a little bit last week, initially we had anticipated including being able to fund transportation for the new elementary school and the operating costs within the budget. We talked a bit last week about how we had to value engineer the solar panels out of the project. We do anticipate them being in place for FY26, therefore reducing that overall operating cost increase, but for FY25, that is a cost that was not anticipated originally. Our enrollment is increasing. We have that one-time assessment, which the superintendent has discussed a little bit. And then, we've talked about the out-of-district tuition increases and how they have escalated 19% over 2 years. So as we looked at this budget and met with the leadership team, we looked at class sizes, schedules, what are the student needs, what are our current needs, future needs, and we really did take a zero-based approach to this budget.
Could I just piggyback on some of these? So just to emphasize, and I did speak a little bit about it a few meetings ago, that as chair of the North Shore Education Consortium Board, I brought to you the struggles they were having with their HVAC project and the fact that they had kicked the can down the road. And so the substantial tuition increase and one-time assessment that has become a reality for us was definitely unforeseen. I want to thank Eric Hartman at the Tri-Chair for bringing up that special town meeting in 2021 where we did say we would absorb the operating cost and the transportation cost. But as he said that, I recall that special town meeting very clearly. And then as we started to think about why are we not able to do that, I think and I hope sharing this, we've really articulated what has come in our way of why we're at a point where we can't manage that within our regular operating budget. The other thing we looked at in terms of class sizes, schedules, student requirements, more than anything, really, I was pushed to think about what do we stand for as a district, what are my non-negotiables, and so as we get into what this budget funds and what it doesn't fund, I really am firm in one of my beliefs that I'll share with you in this presentation, and it's a non-negotiable for me. So, we really did, it wasn't just about conversations and meetings, it was really soul-searching. Who do we want to be, and what is going to make us who we want to be and remain? And so we'll talk a little bit about this as we go through this budget.
Superintendent, I don't know if you want to speak to this a little bit, but this is, this is a slide you've seen quite frequently. It's just a high-level overview of our overall budget, but showing that, taking the special education cost center out, which, we did discuss with the town administrator during our tri-chair meetings. And, even still, overall, we're growing at 4.6%, which is, certainly much higher than the school department budget typically has grown. I do want to just highlight that if you take a look back at last year and when we presented the budget last year, because, obviously there's a lot of discussion about school budgets with that 14% out-of-district tuition increase. The average budgets across the district increased 6%, and we were still able to find a way, and again, there were some alternative methods, but find a way to stay within that financial guideline.
Can you say that one more time? The average budget within the district went up by 6%?
Districts across Massachusetts.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so if you just we did a poll of different, of the districts, and the average was a 6% increase. And the reason why I bring that up and just kind of take a step back and discuss that is because that's why it's so important for us to, as, the state gives, additional Chapter 70 aid or any kind of reimbursements for the school, it's so important for those to come to the school because we stayed in such a strict percentage increase. Any extra funding that is being allocated to the school, it's very important for us to receive those funds.
This slide for me is important in that it was kind of an aha moment at the tri-chair that Suzanne, Cheryl, and I were at, where the town administrator really articulated it well and said, it's not your general education expenses that can't stay within the financial policy of the town, it is the special education costs. And so that was where the conversation started about we need to look at that bucket differently and how to fund that. Because, quite frankly, I'm proud if you look at taking out the transportation and taking out the operating costs, which we've articulated in the slide previously, why we no longer can absorb that in the operating budget, we're at 2.4%. Granted, that doesn't include the special education costs, but the special education costs are the ones that went up 19% in 2 years, it was unforeseeable. So for me, and I don't want to speak for Suzanne or Cheryl, that tri-chair where the town administrator really recognized that and, focused on, your general ed is not the problem. It is the special education. And he said repeatedly what we've said, it is our obligation. We don't have a choice. We need to educate these kids. But again, when I get into the slide, because we were pushed to think about if you had what you needed, what would you need? I'm going to talk a little bit about the MTSS, which I also shared at Tri-Chair, and how that could potentially have an impact on our special education costs that could go out 3 to 5 years. So that will be a little bit later in this presentation. But this, for me, was a real recognition on the town administrator's part at the Tri-Chair that it's not our general education budget that has a problem. We are living within our means there because every year we start with a zero-based budget and we're building with what we need. We knew going into a new elementary school, and by consolidating 3 schools, we were going to be able to create efficiencies in our program, and we've said that for years. And that's part of what we did when we present this budget to you right now.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Superintendent, you've been saying this for years, that general education is not the problem. And in fact, general education has been eaten away. It's been eroded because of broad cuts, where we can't cut special education costs. We've seen that pie, and the special education pie growing.
But whoever predicted 19% in 2 years?
Nobody.
And that's.
I mean, so maybe that's what pushed it over the edge.
It did,
but
it is.
for sure, this has been.
Well, and the North Shore Education Consortium, I've been a board member for 10 years. We've never had an issue like this. We've had small assessments of $5,000. They've never had an enormous capital HVAC project similar to what we've experienced, and it's been crazy for them to try to handle it. And there's only 18 to 20 districts that are going to, face the
And it's
challenges.
stunning that can't be a part of the MSBA.
Nope.
I know, that's crazy.
They got no COVID funds. As a collaborative, it's very different. One of the things we did that I don't think I've updated the committee on is that there are a lot of non-member districts that send their students there, and they got assessed as well, and we're not thrilled, but as members, we said, you're sending your kids here, you need to be assessed as well. So anyway, those were the unexpected things, but for me, this slide, I know you've seen it several times, has a great impact.
So the total FY25 budget for the school department, including the requested town appropriation, as well as requested capital articles, all of our revolving funds, circuit breaker, and our grants, is a total of $37,545,767. We did talk about this a bit last week already, so this should look fairly similar. However, per your request, Amy, I did break out what makes up that $524,000. 40 of it comes from our school rental, 280,000 from athletics, 129,683 from our preschool revolving fund, and 75,000 from extended day. So this just, helps, and I think the committee had asked for a slide similar to this when we went through our proposed new budget format, just so everyone can see what is, it's not just the town appropriation. And the one piece that is missing, that once the town is further along with their budget, we'll then update this and put what are the school costs that sit in the town budget, and I will update this slide with that information. So, we've talked about special education quite a bit, but, and we've talked about what is driving that.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure.
The $40,000 for the school rental, is that specifically because of after-school? The after-school program?
Yes.
Okay. I asked that because I noticed that as of, I think it was 2 years ago, it jumped up significantly.
But that's also the other rentals as well, correct? Like when the building may be rented for,
Yeah,
I know it includes
Right.
others, but all of a sudden it just jumped
because
pretty dramatically.
because we have an outside vendor,
Okay.
correct, for after school.
Okay.
so, outside of tuition, which is like one of the major cost drivers of special education, we've talked about the foster care and homeless transportation, which is, highly unpredictable for us as a district. It just depends on who comes in. We do receive a small portion of that as reimbursement, which goes to the town general fund, but should be coming back to the school department at special town meeting. There is a overall staff shortage as far as trying to find special education staff. There's an increase in clinical services for home and hospital tutoring that Mrs. Raymond has seen. We also have increased translations and needs for much higher needs for interpreters. And then just making sure that we're staying on top of professional development as well. This is something that I think is sometimes difficult to put into context or truly understand why a school budget can fluctuate so wildly and from week to week and day to day. So this is just a few examples of something that occurred in just 1 week within the Student Services Department. So we had someone move in who lives over 45 minutes away from Swampscott. We were responsible for the transportation, which was quoted at $350 a day. They were able to work out a plan with the family and just do mileage reimbursement, which is a huge cost savings for us, but still, a cost that we wouldn't normally or didn't anticipate incurring. Through registration and early intervention, they identified a child with high needs that was a medical student, ranging to up to $1,000 a day for a residential placement. And then, as the superintendent had mentioned, we were also that same week informed about the North Shore Educational Consortium. So it just, again, this was just a 1 week snapshot, and just showing why there's such volatility sometimes in the special education budget. We talked a little bit about this last week, but this is just how much we've actually spent over the last 10 years. Our 10-year average increase for special education expenditures is 5.9%. And over the 10 years, we've incurred $5,468,318 in increased costs. But this also just shows that volatility, that year to year, there can be volatility within the budget.
So as we talked about last week, what's interesting to me on this page on 9 is how dramatic the up and downs are.
Mm-hmm.
Between 9% to 0% to 5% to 0% to 11%. And I can't help but extrapolate that things are going to be worse post-pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
Especially since we see 2 years in a row, if not, and then we see
It's only getting
24
worse.
and 25 in here as well.
Right.
So, while it makes sense to look back, I think probably as much as we can capture Martha's expertise to talk about forward prediction, as difficult as that is.
Mm-hmm.
She's on it weekly.
Yeah. No,
She really is daily.
Yeah.
It changes the percentage of, I mean, that chart is invaluable where she makes predictions of who's going to go out, who's going to stay in, who we can, educate within the district. That is one of her many strengths.
Yeah, because I think it's easy to sort of look back on this and hope that we'll have more years like FY15 or FY17, when the reality is it's going to be closer to 22, 23, and 24.
And like we discussed last week, FY21, the negative 1.8 is an outlier and really shouldn't even be part of the analysis, because that was the year all the schools were shut down. So if you take that out of the analysis, you have a 14.5%, a 7.8, and then 11.4% increase. And then we know this year and going forward is just exponentially growing. This is, the same slide that we showed last year, but as the committee requested, I did put a little sidebar in there, just talking about how the best practice is to keep a full year circuit breaker balance in circuit breaker. So if we did that, that would have been for FY '25, that blue bar, if we were adhering to best practice, would be $1,861,660. And what circuit breaker really is that savings account for us, right? Which helps with that volatility that we just discussed earlier. That's the purpose of it.
When you take this to present to the Finance Committee, I think it would behoove everybody if we could talk, or if you could put some more color around what it means to be best practice, because certainly when the rest of the school committee talks about it, we just say best practice because we're parroting the experts. So to understand what other districts are doing and who's driving that, where are the recommendations coming from?
I'm kind of curious too, like along those lines, like is it best practice to leave the money here, or is it better practice to have a revolving account with the town that's holding this money? And where's why are they thinking that's better than holding it here?
And who is they?
No, I'm just saying, we have a special education reserve account that we got to fund because we agreed to spend down this a little bit. Mm-hmm. So we have that, but it's either us holding it or them holding it, sort of. Do you know what I'm saying? And is it better practice financially, like looking at our books and looking at our accounting, our auditing, whatever, that we have best practice, or is it better that they have this money in reserve for us if we need it? Do you know what I'm saying? Which is the better practice?
You want me to be completely honest? To me, it feels like we're not trusted to keep, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, well,
all we ever do is prepay out-of-district tuition with this, so it allows us to, have some predictability. And I feel like now they wanted to see it, now they're seeing it on the town side. So that's just how I feel.
Right. My point is why is it so important to see it on that side and not on our side?
Well, I'll repeat what I said last week. I mean, I think that this comes down entirely to what the role is of the school committee in being able to manage their budget, and the rub that is between the school committee and the town administrator, who does not trust that this money is being spent properly. And by moving it into an account that requires a vote of town meeting, that essentially negates the role of the school committee to approve the dollars to be spent as they should be spent.
I agree. And it also has to go through the Board of Selectmen before it even can be put on a warrant to get to town meeting. I mean, I just think when education reform, when the laws were enacted, this is how they set it up. They gave the schools circuit breaker. They didn't say, let's give this reimbursement to the town in case the schools need it, right? The laws set it up this way, and over the last, 6 or 7 years, because of this 2-point whatever guidance, it has eroded and eroded and eroded to the point where it's $450,000. I mean, that's
can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, I just want to reiterate, and I absolutely believe that the $1.8 million should rest with the schools. There's many, many reasons, everything from the privacy of the individual families and students moving in, that the school district can move and pay that money as it is appropriate without having to go to a vote, et cetera, et cetera. I strongly believe that this money should rest with us, and there's nothing that will change my mind on that.
I do just want to point out to the committee that at the time with which this was discussed and decided on, that the 14% increase was still unsure, right? Mm-hmm. And I think from my perspective, that is what played into some of this, because it was still very much, and there was a lot of headwinds behind it, trying to get the state to step in, right? So I think, you know, that there was a piece of it that it's this 14% might not actually come to fruition.
Right.
And there's a very real possibility that it wouldn't. And so therefore, rather than having the funds sitting in the appropriated, the thought process, rather than having it sit in the appropriate budget for a possibility, put it in a reserved fund if it happens for us to be
So that makes sense, and I think, I want to say something, and I don't know if it was my understanding when we were making the case to have the reserve fund, that it was not in lieu of spending down our circuit breaker, that was truly an insurance, so that for, you know, if there is a 14% raise, which is shocking, that's there for that moment, rather than spending this down so that it becomes almost like a fait accompli, that we're going for that almost immediately. So when we first started talking about having that reserve fund, it was under the previous business administrator, and it was not, if I recall, the intention that it was an either or, but a both and.
Like in a perfect world, we'd have a full circuit breaker and a revolving account.
Yes.
Right,
I
100%.
mean, in a perfect world, that's what it should look like.
So that it is in fact really
Right.
for extraordinary circumstances.
Right.
And you
like a
don't have to
14%.
touch it very often and
Right.
replenish it every year.
Right.
I think that's what we were working under, and I'm not just talking about last year with the 14%. I'm looking back pre-pandemic. This has been going on for a long time. But I don't think that was the intention of the town. I think the intention of the town administrator was always to decimate this circuit breaker.
All right,
Onward.
beat that horse.
So, last week, it was requested to kind of pull up a historical picture of what the circuit breaker balance has been. And so I went back to 2016. I did include the revenue and expenditures here because I think that was, because if you look at 2016, the balance in circuit breaker, which is the blue graph, or the blue bar, I'm sorry, is quite similar to 2025, but what the difference is that our revenues and expenditures were far lower in 2016, so the balance that we were carrying forward, you know, wasn't that big of a discrepancy versus when you look at 2024 and 2025.
Superintendent, do you recall when Martha joined us, what year that was? Because one of her first tasks was to, in fact, grow that circuit, bring that circuit breaker back up to full funding levels.
Martha Seibert?
Yeah. Because before that, it really, we weren't looking at it sort of consistently and just.
It was probably 2019. I believe she was with us. She just hit her 4th year,
Okay.
and she left in 2023, so maybe 2018.
That would sort of fit with the way that this is.
2018, yeah.
As we talked about last week, I do think it's helpful to discuss again, you know, when we talk about metrics and we talk about how do we compare and what do we look like as a district. Swampscott actually spends less in net school spending, above net school spending than the average across the district at 41%. Next, these are, I don't know if Superintendent, you want to
Sure.
elaborate on this?
Yep, so we separated these out about the district goals for the FY25 budget, what we are meeting and what we're not meeting, so we have adjusted what you saw last week. But what the goals for this budget are to, add the required busing for students at Swampscott Elementary School. As always, looking for efficiencies in staffing at Swampscott Elementary School. And as I spoke earlier about it, I talked about the fact that knowing we were consolidating 3 schools, we expected to be able to have some efficiencies created by part-time staff and traveling staff and programs all being in one building. And so that was an expectation that we were going to be able to do that moving into the new elementary school. We have an upper and a lower media center, and it was really important that we staff that appropriately. Molly Matavier, who came here the other night, is a certified librarian, and we know many, many years ago when we did away with librarians, that was not a popular way to go. However, it's interesting that some of my colleagues across the state are struggling with that right now and trying to look for savings in their budgets. But it was really important, and I've said to this committee before, I'm not opening an almost $100 million elementary school and not staffing it appropriately. So that was really important. One of the other things that we had for years, if I go back to my elementary principal days, was having full-time kindergarten aides. But one of the things that I wanted to maintain, and it was on the chopping block early on, is those part-time kindergarten aides for a few reasons. Our little ones are coming in less prepared than they used to. The other win with this model that we formed is these FTEs do not cost health insurance on the town side because they are part-time. They are under the 20 hours that would allow them health insurance, and therefore we have that savings on the town side. You just need lots of hands with little ones, and that was very, very important to maintain. We also, as we said, start with a zero-based budget, so we're able to look for efficiencies in staffing at both the middle and high school as well. It's not that we target any one school, contrary to last year's belief through the budget season, but we look everywhere. The conversations that Ms. Stella had with the administration was, you need to look, where can you create efficiencies? It's not about protecting jobs or positions or people. It's about what the student needs are and where those resources are allocated. So we do that every year. It's probably staffing our English language learners or EL services for our growing population. And we've touched on this before in previous meetings, but part of that is depending on the level of language, English language our students have, their service delivery is very different. Some need more hours than others, and in order to meet the requirements that DESE lays out, we need more English language learner staff. Reducing class sizes at the high school from an average of 25 to 22. We're working on that in a couple of ways. This isn't completely solved yet. This is where Ms. Stella mentioned working with the union. Conversations are ongoing with the union right now. I do have some ideas about how to do that. It's as I shared class sizes with the tri-chair, and we were going to try to fit it in here, but there's just too many documents. There are core classes with high numbers, and that's not okay for me, even at the high school level. So we're working to solve that as well. And then we're, for a couple of reasons, we're looking at the 5th grade at the middle school and moving it to more of an elementary model where they won't be switching with 3 teachers, they'd be switching with 2. We do have a couple of class sizes at 26, but some of those students get pulled for different subjects, so they're not constantly at 26. But either way, we're looking at being able to do our multi-tiered systems of support with more fidelity, and changing the schedule to more of an elementary model in 5th grade. And that is a shift for both the administration, the teachers, and the students as well, but we feel like it's the right thing to do right now. So these are the district goals for the budget that were met, but if we go to the next slide, there's priorities that are not met, and this is what I'd like to share with you.
Can I just ask
Sure.
you a quick question, just on the high school class size, that's one of your goals? How optimistic are you on that one?
I'm very optimistic.
I was trying to get a sense, I couldn't tell just the way you were.
No, I think I've had preliminary conversations, and actually while I was away, the union wanted to schedule a meeting. We have one Monday afternoon at 3:45. It's our typical e-board meeting. You know, contractually, I only have to meet with them 3 times a year. We have such a solid relationship that as needed, we meet, and things are bubbling up, and, you know, teachers are getting concerned about the new elementary school. I'm hoping today's announcement kind of settled people. So we have quite an agenda every time we meet, and this is on my Monday agenda. So.
I have a question for you about the kindergarten aides.
Mhm.
I'm just thinking about contracts. Are those ESPs?
They are not, they're just,
They are outside of the union?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
And the union's okay with that?
yes.
Okay.
But they are, I mean, I go back to when we had full-time, full-day
Yeah.
kindergarten aides in every classroom. They're just so little. So we talked a lot about that. So 2 things. I divided these, well, several things, but I divided these into what it would be my highest priority. So at the tri-chair meeting, you know, we had a similar conversation to what we're having right now. And the question arose with, well, if you had, bless you. It wasn't, I'm paraphrasing, but it was, if you had what you needed and what you wanted, what would it be? And the select board chair asked a really good question about talking about our increase in special education costs. And I was trying to explain that in the absence of a solid MTSS model, which is multi-tiered systems of support, we've often said internally, Martha, Cheryl, and I, special education is the only game in town. If you don't have somebody to do the proper interventions with students in a general education setting, you're going to default to IEPs. Once you get on an IEP, you're not going to come off it because you're going to want the safety net from elementary to middle, and then, well, we get to 8th grade, we don't want to send them to high school without, you know, that safety net. So the costs become exorbitant. So I was explaining at the tri-chair, and I really felt there was a good understanding that by having interventionists, and just a reminder for everybody, and even for Noelle, what multi-tiered systems of support are, is, and, you know, call it MTSS, I feel like I was doing it 20 years ago in the classroom. There's whole group instruction. Everybody gets the whole group instruction. And you call that the core. And then you're going to see pockets of kids that might need core plus more. So they get the core, they get the whole group instruction. The second tier would be you'd go into a small group. So now they got the whole group and they're getting small group. If they're still not acquiring the skills necessary, you go to a 3rd tier, and that 3rd tier might be 1-to-1 with an interventionist, and it might be very targeted and specific academic needs. So it could be 1 or 2 skills that they're going to say, we're going to do these interventions for 6 weeks and see if we can bring this student up to speed and get them back to a tier 2. So in the absence of having that model, to have an interventionist to do that 3rd tier, people are defaulting to special education. And therefore, we're trying to stop that by conducting an MTSS model with fidelity. And one of the things it doesn't have is we're reducing one of the interventionists in our budget that we're presenting right now. So we would want to add in another interventionist. That is the whole MTSS. But when I talked earlier about my philosophy, and I really had to do some soul searching on this, because we all know that social emotional learning and kids' mental health is my #1 priority, but a very close second has become the career and technical education programs that we offer kids. And I actually get goosebumps that I'm proud, and I've said it repeatedly, proud of the fact that we are a comprehensive high school that offers our students different paths. We offer them choices. We've done that with the innovative pathways, advanced manufacturing. We've done it with the business and finance and innovative pathways. And we've done that with the After Dark program at Essex North Shore Agricultural and Technical High School. The problem here is we have been funding our After Dark program where our 11th grade students do their academics here and go to Essex Tech through ESSER That's gone away. We now have to find a way to fund those 11th graders that are currently there, who are going to be seniors next year, without ESSER. We can do it, but just minimally. I don't want to have to say to our kids, if there's 15 kids that want to do the After Dark program, oh, I'm sorry, I only have this much money, so it can only be 6 of you that are going to go. I don't want to limit students' choices of the path they're going to take for their career. And so if I'm not meeting my priority here, I'm sending kids to the After Dark program, but I'm constraining and limiting how many kids can go so that I can try to fund it and find a way to fund it within the budget.
And we can't send them to Essex Tech sort of full-time because there aren't enough spaces.
No, some of these kids have applied and haven't made it, so this is their second way in. But, we are tracking how many kids are actually graduating from the program, who's going into, we've started to look at the data, who's going actually into the field. And as I think Dr. Bacon brought up at a central office meeting, who's bringing it back to Swampscott and going into these fields within our own community and being electricians or plumbers and contributing to our community? My point is, we're struggling to fund it in a limited capacity, and I don't want to do that. I want, like I said, if 15 kids want to go over there and there's 15 seats available and Essex Tech says, Swampscott, you can have 15 seats, I don't want to be the one to say, sorry, can't afford it.
What's the dollar on that?
Pam, what's the dollar amount?
So right now, we have 7 students. The dollar amount would be about $10,000 each. I think it's in a later slide. It's about $10,000 per student.
Yeah.
Last year, it was $7,500, so I think we're looking at $52,500 that we owe.
This year, and then estimated 70,000 next year.
But that's a cap of 7, so we're looking at about 10,000 apiece.
Yeah.
But, so Glenn, you remember this, and all I keep thinking about is the Matt Malone days, when he
Right.
had to cut all the career and technical education, and Mr. Butler went down to the middle school. I refuse to do that. That's one of my non-negotiables. There's too many kids that we've talked about for too many years that need a hook to stay in school and that need to get to that advanced manufacturing class. Not everyone is a college-bound track. And so anyway, those are my 2 highest priorities. If we're going to try to stave off the special education costs, then I would want money for another interventionist to really do our MTSS program with fidelity. And I would like money so that we don't have to cap off the experiences we give our kids in the area of CTE.
And an interventionist is like the cost of a
Teacher.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So my medium priorities are definitely a health teacher at the middle school. We are not meeting those needs. Middle school, God bless you, Mr. Kalishman. He embraces it. He loves it. I think it's a special person. So does Ms. Zotto. There are special people that run that middle school because I walk down the halls and I think I'm ducking and covering, and more so than I am here at the high school. The other medium priority is, just like we implemented a new math program, we're looking at implementing a new literacy program, and the cost is such that Ms. Stella, Dr. Bacon, and I have talked about a multi-year rollout, so doing like K2 and then 3-5, or even stretching it out for 3 years. That's not the way to do a program. The best practice way to do a program is to roll it out all at once, K5, and so that would be a priority for me. In addition, we have science classes at the high school that are high, and the high school has requested, beginning last year, an additional science teacher, which if we go back to the Gelfand days, when he gave us so much money to be really focused on science, that is a need I feel we have. And then a lower priority, but just as important, is building-based substitutes, to have somebody in the building every day that you can rely on, not only to be a substitute, but we have student support team meetings, we have data meetings, somebody that could float and be there every day. It is on that wish list, if I had a wish list. So those are the areas that are most important to me.
Are we out of compliance by not having a health teacher at the middle school?
No, because they're teaching it through physical education. It's just not a really robust way of doing it, in my opinion. We're meeting our requirements.
And has there been any discussions about, I know it's grant monies, but the monies that are coming in to each town regarding, from the opiate settlement?
We have not had any discussion around that. So the next slide is a continuation of this slide, and it's much of which I've already said. So, additional MTSS support would help reduce IEP evaluations and new IEPs and services. After Dark program provides an alternative pathway. This basically I've just said in the previous slide. The MTSS gaps, so if we reduce to 2 specialists, 2 interventionists, we're only going to be able to really service 60 students versus if you think 30, 30, 30, we'd have 90 students, so there's the gap there. This is an analysis that Mr. Harris, Dr. Bacon, and Ms. Raymond did. So if you add 1 certified teacher in reading intervention to maintain the current level of service at an estimate of $85,000 for a total of 2 years, it would be $170,000. Anticipated cost savings over 5 years in reduced IEPs and services would be $228,375, so a net return of $58,375. To fund the After Dark program for up to 7 students, an estimated $70,000. However, an anticipated cost saving over 3 years if a student can't be serviced through an After Dark program and would have to go out of district at a potential $313,273 over 3 years is a net return of $243,273. So the summary is our total request, if we were to be asked what we would want to fulfill our goals within this budget, is for $155,000. And if our estimates are correct over 5 years, a net return of over $300,000. So that was the analysis that was tough to do, but makes sense to do. And it's not as if, I hope to bring this back to Tri-Chair and bring it back to even Finance Committee and Select Board, that, we're not asking for $500,000. We're asking for $155,000 or even $200,000. I really, 7 students. Now, I don't know if there's some years with After Dark, there are 7 students. Some years there's less. So, I could be Pollyanna-ish and thinking there's going to be 15 students that want to do it. I just don't want to limit ourselves because of the funds that are available. And so that was a lot of soul searching I did. As proud as I am of the mental health work that we've done, I'm also proud that we're offering students other pathways and other choices and hands-on programs that are going to get them through that English class or that biology class because they know they're going to go see Mr. Natoli later, or they're going to go to Mr. Rovey even, the arts programs just as well. So I'm proud of calling us a comprehensive high school, and I don't want to lose that.
I think the hard part is that that's $155,000 for probably some of our most at-risk students.
Yes. Yes, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, this is great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And what would that bring our percentage up to if they were to give us that? Would that be up at that original 7%?
5.1.
Oh, only 5.1.
And I do want to point out, I do think the superintendent mentions this slide specifically, and this information was actually something that was asked of us during Tri-Chair by the Select Board Chair to bring back to them.
Yes.
Based off our discussions.
They haven't seen it yet, so.
Right.
So, what happens when it goes to Tri-Chair? Because it's not, I think that's the piece that I'm really struggling with, is that I think it's great that colleagues are having these discussions, but to what end? Who's making that decision? Because it can't be made privately.
I think we just provide the information, and my hope would be that the boards are going to have a joint committee meeting. I thought a few weeks ago, the last meeting I was at, we were really talking about having a finance committee, select board, school committee meeting, and having those discussions in public, and being able to say, You asked, we provided, the school committee knows we've provided, so where does it go now? I mean, we can only continue to provide, and certainly Ms. Stella has provided everything that's been asked for, and so we often wonder, okay, now what?
Yeah. So we talked about this last week, about how to maneuver with this, with a tri-board.
Because also the other chairs of the two other boards are sort of in agreement with us that the 2% plus new growth doesn't work for this budget, and they also want to understand, when do you pull the trigger to like not have a year that you don't do this,
Right.
right? Like, they want to know that too, and they would learn it at a summit as well.
Yeah.
You know, with presentations, and I think Amy Sarah wants to learn it too, because she's worked in districts where they've done this and then had a reset, and then done it again, and then had a reset.
Yeah.
And she's been asking the same questions, right? So if we're asking it, finance committee's asking it, and select board are asking it, then, you know, we have a better chance of sort of getting an answer, or developing a solution together, maybe. I mean, I get your frustration that it's not happening in public, but I don't think it's ready yet.
Yeah,
Like, I think it's still percolating a little bit.
I don't disagree with you, you know, but I also think that sort of consistently, we find ourselves sort of bumbling along, and then all of a sudden, it's town meeting, and everybody says, well, we can't really do this, we can't fight this on town meeting floor, and we don't want to fight on town meeting floor. But it surprises me that here we are in January, and we're all moving along with this 2.2 budget that has been, you know, the decision has been made for several years now without really having discussion about what two departments really need. So, Ms. Stella, when you shared the town administrator's budget directive to his staff, you know, and one of the things that he's looking for is the budget minus 10%. You know, obviously that says, like, we're in a really difficult position as a town, in terms of what dollars we have to spend. So whereas other towns might be looking for overrides, we're not looking at overrides, we're just looking at a tax rate that is still within the 2.5%, but higher than what it has been. So, you know, I just think that it's important for us to be asking, to have these conversations before the decision gets made, but it's really like unclear, when does that decision get made every year? I don't know.
And who makes it?
Right, and say, if I could, Amy, just to dovetail on you, you know, we're supposed to vote on this budget next Thursday.
Sorry,
we missed the
we
first part.
missed the beginning of that, Glenn.
I'm sorry, you know, we're supposed to vote on this budget next Thursday. And I feel we'll be doing it in a vacuum, because, you know, there are some interesting numbers here. I mean, there's the 155-ish that, you know, the superintendent just spoke about. There is, you know, the circuit breaker money that, you know, doesn't exist on our budget any longer. And I really do, and I know we spoke about it last week, we need a meeting of all three boards. And I don't know if we can vote on our budget until we make this presentation, you know, board to board, not in a tri-chair. That's fine if the tri-chairs want to discuss this.
I
think in an open forum has to happen.
I would argue, though, Glenn, that it doesn't, that obviously the tri-board meeting has to happen, but that doesn't negate us voting on a budget that we see appropriate.
I agree, you're right.
You know, that we have to do our job and identify our needs no matter what. And I think to your point, Ms. Stella, it's good that we're doing this earlier so that it just gives more opportunity for discussion.
Isn't that what we did last year, though?
Yeah.
We
See, that's what I'm trying, that's
Yeah.
what I was driving at, is that,
It sounds like we're headed down the same path.
right, and that was ugly.
Well, I mean, but I think to that point, we can't, you know, one of the things that we did last year was we had the superintendent's budget, and then we had the school committee budget, and at every turn, the school committee budget was completely discounted. And so clearly there has to be consistency from here about what we need. And so while I appreciate Superintendent and Ms. Stella, what you have been doing, to maintain this 2.2 and get as close to that as possible. But I look at this and say, that's $155,000 for our most vulnerable students. How do we, in good conscience, not fund that? Or at least ask for it to be funded. And if they'd like to cut it, then they can cut it.
Right.
I think that's where we're
And that's who we
presenting.
are as a town.
Right, and I don't look at it as a superintendent budget any longer, I look at it as a draft. It's a draft budget. So we get away from one versus another, it's a draft.
I do
And,
feel like
where-
that was weaponized
Yeah.
last year a little bit.
It was weaponized.
Right, so we're looking at a draft budget versus what we are eventually going to vote on and discuss. And I think that makes this a little cleaner, and I know it takes some of the wording that was used against the school department last year away.
Are there what are the laws around that, around like the superintendent budget, school committee budget, or is that just a formality that we've been using?
I'm assuming it's probably in your policies, as it is in I think probably every district's policies, that the superintendent is charged with presenting
Yeah,
their recommended budget to the school committee, and then it passes, then it goes to the school committee, and they're the ones who vote their budget, and that is the official budget,
yeah.
is the school committees.
Shall we finish?
Sure. So this slide we looked at last week, but it is quite a powerful slide, really looking at what's our enrollment been doing, which it's now actually increasing, and then what are our staffing levels looking like, and mapping those two together. As we all know, we had reductions to staffing in 2024 to meet that guideline. So it's an interesting graphic to really see what is happening in the schools. This next slide was something that the committee had requested we do, which I thought was really helpful, and it's actually taking that same enrollment information, but then plotting the number of IEPs historically in a similar graph. So you can see that clearly that has increased significantly in the last couple years, which isn't really a surprise to any of us in the district, but might certainly be for others when they're looking at this information.
Thank you, Ms. Stella, for doing this.
Oh, you're welcome.
And seeing 21 was sort of the close, I mean, would this more look like a straight shot up if it wasn't for that sort of weird year?
I mean, maybe it is kind of hard to say whether when the schools were closed, what impact that had on number of IEPs. I mean, people weren't in school, so they weren't necessarily requesting them, but.
Right.
And also, the school closed in March, so we had April, May,
Right.
way to make IEPs, maybe June. So it's not like
Right.
we even had that many months to have new IEPs.
That's what I mean. I
And then
feel like
the
that
referrals.
chart would go more like a straight line up.
It is very hard, and there's really no way around this. We have to put 2021 in there, but
Yeah.
as we kind of talked about last week,
Yeah.
it's like you kind of
It's an
throw that
aberration, yeah.
data out. It's really not indicative of
Yeah,
what.
should always just have a big parentheses and an asterisk around.
Yeah.
So it's curious, when you say that, when you see that this is nearing 500 kids who are on IEPs. So eventually, unless we get some of these support staffs, and we're going to wind up with that special education isn't special education, it's education.
Yeah, we're at almost a quarter now.
Yeah.
And I think, I believe Martha Raymond presented this to the committee, but just a reminder that this year, and perhaps even last year too, for the first time, Swampscott's number of IEPs actually was above the state average.
Yeah.
Which it's always been below. So this is just looking at our FTE history, and the difference here is that it includes the 2025 budget in addition to the 2024 numbers. You can see it declining.
So Superintendent, do you think that we're essentially, now that our numbers are going back up with our students and our staff count continues to go down, our educator count continues to go down, are we essentially just playing a late catch-up to where we, like, should it have been these numbers 2 years ago, and we're going back up now that we have more
No, I think
kids,
every year we do an analysis, and it's appropriate for the year we're going into. And what you need to keep in mind is,
But is it appropriate? Because we're saying here that we need more.
well, it's appropriate, it's workable, is what I say in my letter in the budget book. It's workable. It's not ideal. It's not a minus 10%. It's workable.
Okay.
What I do need the committee to recognize, and certainly Ms. Stella knows this, and so does Lisa Colts, that if something comes up in September, I don't care what that number is, and we have a student need, we're getting it, and then we'll find a way to fund it. So it's never a hard and fast number.
Yeah.
It is conversations through central office, weekly or biweekly, through leadership. What are the student needs? If students move in, we get them what they need, no matter what this number is. And this number's going to change between, September 1st and June 30th.
Yeah.
So we don't hold hard and fast with that. But, I've said before, and sometimes you've been very, critical is too strong a word. You've cautioned me to always try to be collaborative at the expense of the kids, and I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is, I understand we all have to work together. I have to work with the general government side of things, so this is workable. And the town administrator did say he requires all his department heads to do, a horrible budget, the worst case scenario, a workable budget, an ideal budget. And I think at the tri-chair, he said, this is an ideal budget. I said, it's not ideal. This is workable. And so those things that we're not meeting would be great, but those are the things I'm sacrificing for workable. And we all, we make it work, but at the same time, I don't want you to think I make it work at the expense of student needs. Because it could be next week, Ms. Stella's going to present a budget memo for FY24, and I could say, I don't care, we're getting it, we're doing it, it's right for kids. So it changes just daily, based on what's in the best interest of the kids, and that's not just an expression. We really walk that talk here, so.
And I just want to bring this back to the committee comments, and for that reason, because often generally the student needs are some kind of special services, right? And that is why having that circuit breaker is helpful, right? Because those are needs that are going to be met, and regardless of whatever numbers we're presenting here in January, 6-9 months from now, the picture could look different. And so that is one of the reasons why it is helpful to have that balance. I think, like you discussed before, an ideal world would be to have full circuit breaker and full special education reserve, right? Is that realistic, especially kind of given the constraints we live under here in Swampscott? I don't know. But certainly at least the full balance between what we have in circuit breaker and the reserve, right? Which we don't have right now.
I just think that the idea that we have set up a reserve in conjunction with the town that we are already dipping into sort of speaks to the fact that this wasn't set up, like, that's an emergency account.
Right. It's not being used
So
like that.
clearly, it's not, like, this is, if this circuit breaker were fully funded, if we had been able to manage that the way that it has been managed for the last few years, we wouldn't need to go into that.
It's another line item, right?
Yeah, and a vote at town meeting.
Yeah.
Right, so again, then it's just sort of part of our normal budget,
Right.
but that we can't access
Yeah,
now.
that's been handed over to somebody else. Okay.
So we went through this slide last week, just showing our compensation growth. I did add that sidebar that the committee had requested, just really speaking to the fact that, our total compensation is increasing far less than the financial guideline, and that truly is a result of the efficiencies within the staff, and that the 4.6% budget that we are presenting is not driven by employees or how they're compensated at all, but truly just our mandated and required costs. It has nothing to do with our staffing.
Well, I'd say it still has something to do with our staffing,
it
but it's
does.
not the driver of overruns this year.
Correct. As we talked about before, our average teacher pay here in Swampscott is something that is often looked at as again, another metric. And from 2020, 2021, and 2022, which is the most recent data we have from the state, Swampscott is slightly below the average teacher pay for the peer communities that we use during our bargaining. I don't know if you want me to talk a little bit about this, but I can start it if you want, Superintendent.
Sure.
Or you can either or, but this was something that I believe, Ms. O'Connor, you had kind of asked, like, what is our district today? Like, what is reality? And so, when you think about this budget and our school district, we spend less than the state average, above net school spending. Our average teacher pay is less than the average among our peer communities. Our enrollment is increasing, our FTEs are decreasing. Even at a 4.6%, as the superintendent mentioned, we're not meeting all of her high priority goals. Our compensation growth is below the guideline, which, the staff efficiencies that we have on our budget is a positive impact to the town's health insurance budget, helps relieve some of the pressure that they see on that line. Our class sizes are an issue broadly. As we discussed, we've increased referrals, our IEPs are increasing, a lot of that as a direct result of not having a robust MTSS system. And we are not rolling out the literacy program across all grades, which is best practice. Do you want to speak to that just a little bit? I don't know if anybody did listen or get a summary from the governor's address last night, but I did want to mention that she did talk about investing in literacy in that speech. And funding that and funding professional development around that. So I do have some level of hope that there might be some money coming out of the state, which potentially could help us with this. As I'm sure everyone recalls, there is that extra tax that on the millionaire's tax, which is dedicated to schools and roads. They had the revenue consensus hearing for the FY25 state budget. As part of that hearing, they are projecting a 2% increase in state revenues and $1.3 billion in additional funds from that millionaire's tax for FY25. And so, it remains to be seen what they'll do with that money. This year, for the schools, they used it to fund the universal free meals. But hopefully, we'll see some of that funding and perhaps some grant opportunities for new literacy programs. The other thing I wanted to mention, too, as I'm kind of talking about her address last night, she did mention that she is fully funding the Student Opportunity Act. So Chapter 70 will be fully funded in FY25. Based on our enrollment, I expect our Chapter 70 money to increase again for FY '25. And I know there's been a lot of discussion around this year, and their revenue projections are down significantly at the state. And so she's making those, what they call 9C budget cuts, but they have fully committed to fully funding local school aid and municipal aid. So there's no concern that our state aid this year is gonna, go down. And I feel really positive that next year that she's still gonna fully fund Student Opportunity Act. And so we shouldn't have issues with the Chapter 70 next year.
Well, theoretically, I mean, because, like this year, with our additional Chapter 70 monies, the first agreement was to hold some of that back for the insurance costs that the town has borne, which makes sense. But what else is going to be held back? Because it doesn't come directly to us.
Yeah, it's another agreement that needs to be made, right? Yeah.
Any additional questions, comments?
I thought a little bit more about this piece of the puzzle as it relates to our budget book. And, I think that, and also to your piece about, Mr. Hartman talking about not, being able to do one piece of the puzzle at a time. And, it seems to me that when we do sit down for a tri-board meeting, that it's this piece of the puzzle that we talk about, along with the things that you were talking about with the net school spending, and really kind of understanding and helping our counterparts in the other boards to understand what that means. So, I don't want to get lost in that during our budget process, but I do think that we have to bring our counterparts along so that they're understanding that we're not just complaining about not having enough money.
Yeah, I think we've made a lot of inroads recently on having other people understand the net school spending, the circuit breaker, and the Chapter 70 for sure. I think this presentation does it better than any I've seen before about why that money is ours. Mm-hmm. Like that circuit breaker money, why it's ours, like why it has to be part of our budget, like for our budget certainty, and just the getting the transportation money that comes to the town, like why that has to be ours because of these I think that's the next. We shouldn't be fighting over circuit breaker money or Chapter 70 money. I mean, Chapter 70 money, I sort of get. Let's pay into our employees' health care or I mean, there are some things, and if the town is going to help us fund buses, let's say, like I could see taking some money off the top of all that for those expenses that the town's incurring for us, but then.
But let's not fight about the rest of it.
There shouldn't be a fight. There should be a formula for how we're breaking up, and this is just what it looks like year after year. And
well, I think that's the piece that I wrote down in my notes. It's like how do we set up a process so that articles are on the warrant, that we don't have to rely on an 11th hour surprise, that we just go about the business of doing what we need to do. And I don't know how to get there, but I don't know how to get there. And
So this, the budget book will be available tomorrow at our office?
Well, I mean, theoretically, it's already available
Well,
because
yeah.
we've had public meetings.
But if people wanted hard copies, we usually have a few hard copies available at the superintendent's office or the business office, wherever, if the public wanted to come by and get a hard copy.
I don't think we can go forward without including that $155,000 in there. Anybody?
I think everybody agrees with you.
I think that when you talk about the workable budget versus the worst case scenario versus the best case scenario, I mean, everything goes in the best case scenario, right? Like, we should see a budget with all this stuff in it. But
I mean, a best case scenario, right,
What is
would
that?
be a 1.8 circuit break. Like, a best case scenario would be, is like, we're talking about another $2 million.
Right, so that was exactly what I was gonna say, Karen. The best case scenario is we increase our budget $2 million 2,016,666 dollars. That fully funds circuit breaker.
quite a,
and
Okay, I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah.
Right,
I'm
so,
just gonna go on record.
No, but I mean, but I think that that's a good point, though, is
Right.
that,
Adding
like,
100
adding another $155,000 into this is
Not-
not our best case
not our
scenario.
best case scenario.
Correct.
Well, quite honestly, if you're gonna go with 155, give me 200, because I don't wanna limit it to 7 kids. That if.
Yeah, I mean,
more-
I just reading those high
Absolutely.
priority and medium priority is like heartbreaking.
5.1, what does that,
But could, but,
45,000 go to?
is the special education reserve fund, is that money that can be used for, the After Dark program?
No.
Okay, right.
No, I mean, I think, I'm proud that it's only 155, and I am fine with that. I just am very much committed, and I didn't realize how much until we went this way, that if kids can't get into Essex Tech on their own, and we can provide an opportunity, I don't want
For
to stop that.
$10,000.
Right. I don't want to stop that.
Which is a lot less than what the town would be paying if they were going full-time to Essex Tech.
That's for sure.
Correct.
Right.
Now, granted though, to be, that is, that we're still paying the net schools for, the average price for that kid, so it's an additional, it is an
Right.
additional 10.
Yeah.
Whereas it would be less if they were going out of district.
Right.
So Superintendent, are you, as you look through the budget, I'm assuming because it is a zero-based budget, that we've looked at everything? and
Yes.
okay.
Yes. I have never been more confident about a budget presentation and a budget book as I am this year. Every year, maybe it's me, but I really feel like there's been no stone unturned, and we do that every year. But I believe it was much more collaborative with the leadership. Everybody was involved in conversations, and Cheryl made herself available multiple times to any principal. We presented at the leadership team, I think I said that through an email to some of you. Cheryl presented at the leadership team, and it was wonderful to have the aha moments that you could see. Suddenly they understood, and weren't afraid to ask questions. It's really been a great process, but nothing, it's zero-based. What do we need? What do our kids need? Who's here? And what are their needs?
So my only, I don't know, I don't want to say concern, but I would have liked to have been able to dig into the recommendations of the athletic director a little bit more, to talk about that budget and what that affords us to do. It looks, based, Ms. Stella, by the numbers that you sent us, that we're not really out of whack in terms of user fees. Even though, Superintendent, I know that you had said that Ms. Farley did want to take a look at that. I think that, I don't think that should hold us back from still doing it.
I completely agree. I don't think this needs to hold us back from that work, because years ago, our goal was to get to 50-50. The revolving account was going to support 50% of athletics, the operating budget.
Yeah.
I think we're at 55, something like that.
We're not there
But I
yet.
don't think that has to be, I think we can still do that work.
Okay.
I don't think we can't. It just feels like, time constraints.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the town does not need to vote on a bottom line budget in order for us to figure out
Right.
what happens with athletics. But what I don't want to see happen is that we put this to bed and it's just put to bed.
Completely agree. We'll keep it on the radar to continue to have those conversations, because truthfully, we ran out of time that night with Ms. Wolf, and we can bring her back and we can continue that dialogue.
Superintendent, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
We're talking about the 155 and we think there's going to be 7 students in the After Dark program. Could I just ask, because I agree with you, if we have to put a little bit more money in there, we should. Is there a way for your team to maybe look ahead to see a scenario? Will it be 7? Will it be 14 students?
Yeah. I'm being a little dramatic, I have to admit. I think the first year we had 7, and we only ended up having 2 graduate from there.
Okay.
And I think this year we might be at 5. So
Okay.
I think 7 is an appropriate number. I can
Great.
dream that, we're going to provide all these kids with what they need, but I think it needs to build. And
That's great.
yeah, I think 7 is an appropriate estimation, so.
Great. I just I wanted to make sure that we weren't underfunding that.
Thank
That's
you.
perfect. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that.
I got a quick question too, just another keep on the radar thing. Thank you for mentioning the athletic fees. Just going back to the opioid settlement, is there any pathway to get, I'm looking at slide 6 here that had all those, the Nahant tuitions, all those fees that were coming in. I didn't see that one on here. Is that?
I think that has to be a discussion with the boards, between the boards. I don't think that's a discussion that our financial teams can have. I think it has to be a select board, FinCom, school committee conversation.
Right, I mean, that's, we've
Not-
heard that, yeah, I mean.
not us.
I understand.
Yeah.
Funds are expended.
But
think it just
we've
has
heard
to-
that a bunch of times, so I just, again, I don't want that to fall by the wayside, just.
I think that's great to keep that on the radar, and we have a joint meeting.
Especially as we look at not having a health teacher in the middle
Exactly,
school.
right.
Right. So can I just ask then, how do we actually go through the process of having a meeting with the 3 boards? Do we have to call that meeting? Do we have to invite both boards and schedule a meeting? I mean, in the past, it was literally, you pick up the phone, you set a date, and you meet. And obviously, we're having some challenge with getting all the boards together, but how do we actually do that to put, pen to paper, schedule a public meeting, and how does that happen?
I thought, didn't we talk last week, Suzanne, about when you share, I might be misspeaking, when you share the budget book with the tri-chair, that will be a request, or?
Yeah, we
Like,
said
what did we
that,
say
we
that?
said that, Cheryl, after we look at this and talk about it again tonight, send it out to the chairs of the finance committee and the select board and say, we did schedule a meeting for next week to discuss this and the questions that we need answered at a tri-board meeting. And I don't think I think, Glenn, like, if we wanted to invite the other boards to come to our meeting, to come to the budget hearing, for example, that's a really easy thing to do, to have the boards call themselves to order and come to our meeting. But to have a discussion that's purposeful and directed, I think that it needs to have a little more structure to it. And I think that we don't want a free-for-all, and we don't want all of us yelling about what we need and what we can't have and why we can't have it. And I think we need to understand, I think we need to decide, we've all been saying, we need to decide, we need some questions answered, and I think that we need people to answer them, come to the meeting ready to answer those questions. Like, for example, why can't we have the full circuit breaker money? Or why do we, when is 2% plus new growth not okay?
Right.
Like, or what's the trigger?
Well, I think setting up, it's not just setting up a meeting. It really is putting an agenda together.
It's putting an agenda together, and honestly, we're not gonna own the meeting.
Yeah.
We're not gonna own the meeing. It's not ours to own, right? Because we don't have the answers. We have all the problems, and maybe some curious, interesting solutions, right? But we need, it's on Sean and the select board and the finance committee. I think Eric's interested in some of these questions, and David's interested in these questions as well. So I think that, our directive for next weekend, when I asked that we meet, I said, basically 2 items. We need to discuss the the special education as the statement in the statement we got about the unexpected costs and what's going to happen with those, and we need to discuss what a tri-board forum looks like.
Yeah. Because last time we did this, there was a lot of work that went into that. It was not
It's
just,
a lot of work.
it
It's
was
not
not just a bunch of people sitting around a
It's
table.
not us just running a meeting and then having them be able to ask and answer questions. It's not that. It was definitely a very structured presentation. Some people worked really hard.
Yeah,
I mean, I know Tim Dorsey worked for months
Yeah.
on his presentation. I know Michael McClung worked for months on his.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I mean,
it's a lot of work.
yeah, but it's really important because I think we all have to be on the same page. We're looking at ourselves and we keep calling ourselves this blue ribbon district and all these great things, and everyone thinks we're doing great. But then when you look at our enrollment going up and our teachers going down and not being able to support these students and these students, it's like who are we?
Right.
Like why is this like? Because it looks good on the outside, because we keep making it look good on the outside, it's like not, like we need a reset. Like, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I mean, I think that those questions that we're trying to develop that we can all discuss as boards are really important.
Would it be helpful for you to have questions from us to bring next week?
Yeah, I would love to have questions. Global questions.
Yeah.
You know, the big
Right.
big questions.
Right,
You
okay.
know, like
We'll send them.
like structural questions,
Yeah.
not where am I
Right.
going to get $155,000?
Right,
no,
no,
I
no, no.
agree.
The
Right, no,
bigger
definitely structural.
overarching.
About how do we operate as a community?
Yeah, how we operate as a community. Like what's important as a community. We keep saying we want this community to be livable,
Yeah.
right? And we want this community to be this and that and the other thing. But like at what point
Yeah.
isn't it for a certain group of people? And that goes, and I'm sure there'll be tons of pushback from the town side too, because all of a sudden, at what point isn't it livable for people on a fixed income? You know, I mean, I totally get that.
Yeah.
You know, I 100%.
But I think that's the piece of it, is that we've got to be able to, you got to bring us along in order to,
Yes, we all
so that
need
we're
to be
making
brought,
decisions.
yes. We all need to be part of the solution, and we all need to understand. I mean, I know we understand how we hear how other districts maybe are hurting here and there, but also, I mean, we're not brought along together at all in this discussion.
No.
We're not. I don't know. My 2 cents.
I-
All right, sorry, we're just cutting off.
No, I agree. I mean, to Amy's point in your email, that the budget memo referenced that all the boards worked together on this guy, and you know what I mean?
Well, that's the memo that's going out to the town and the
Right.
town boards. That was sent to us as a courtesy.
No, I know, but I mean,
No,
there was a
the
line in
letter,
it.
the letter actually said that this is a budget or agreements that have been made with the other
And it listed the
committees.
school committee,
And it
and I
listed the
think-
school committee, and we were definitely not a part of that
Missed
conversation.
that. Anyway, we're going to keep moving on. Like, I know you were going to go over the 24
Yeah,
budget
just-
memo update.
So I guess, is the committee requesting the superintendent, I add the 155,000?
That's what I've heard,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think, I'm hearing you say that this isn't a need.
Yes,
That's what I would want to vote on next week.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll incorporate that. And
I think I'm 100% comfortable with the MTSS money. If you, I mean, if you
85?
think 5 kids is what it's going to be, or 7 kids, and we have the money for that,
We
kind of.
don't, we're
Okay.
trying to figure out how to
All
pay
right.
for it this year. We don't have the money for it.
Okay, yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, so
For
it
sure.
would be 155 that would be
I
added.
mean, we have kids in the pipeline, right, that need to
They
keep-
need, well,
keep
that's just
going,
it, they
right?
need to go
Yeah.
next year.
So just to go back a minute, Amy Sarr's memo said, as in the past several years, we will be looking to meet the town's financial guidelines previously established by the Finance Committee, School Committee, and Select Board.
Yeah, well,
And that's just-
Never,
that's not
never,
accurate.
ever.
I'd also like to get some understanding, if you could, about the, quote, drastic reduction in receipts and what that actually means in terms of numbers.
What paragraph is that? Sorry.
I don't know.
Sorry, I'm just.
And the other piece of the puzzle was that when talking about the growth in, where there were problems, was that there was a 4% increase to health insurance. Now, we contributed a fair amount of our Chapter 70 funding towards that. And the schools make up more than 50% of the town employees. So I would imagine that that seems like a bit of a red herring to me, that is why they're looking to cut the money so drastically, because in fact, we contributed to that.
My understanding from my conversations with Ms. Sorrow is that it's a result of the revenues, not necessarily lines in their budget and growth that they're predicting. It's their
So that makes
estimated
sense,
revenues.
but it actually, she says that there's, because of the she notes that it's because of the 4% increase to health insurance, and I just don't think that that's accurate. If it is, I'd like to understand it better.
All right.
All right, so let's go on to the FY 2024 budget update memo.
So I just wanted to update the committee at this point on where we stand for 2024, as we have finished up our second quarter. You know, as we've talked about before, you know, utilities and out of district and transportation and all those expenditures are encumbered within our budget. And our projection is based on, you know, the current staffing levels that we have today and predicting. As of right now, we have 2 open positions currently in the district, or as of when I wrote the memo. We had 2 open positions that had not been filled, but one of them is actually a grant-funded position, so it doesn't impact the appropriated budget, but I did want to just put that in there. So if you recall, when we came out with the first quarter projection at that point, I was projecting a deficit of $258,000. As we look at quarter 2, I'm projecting a budget deficit of $200,999. You know, we discussed why and what was causing this deficit, and that remains the same. We had a number of district tuitions that were in that maybe column that came to fruition. And as just a reminder, we did freeze the budgets after the first quarter. So only mandated, contracted, and necessary expenditures are allowed. And I do think that because of that freeze, that is why our projection has gotten a little bit better at this point. Part of it is also timing, right? So we know that certain students, we know they're going to go out of district, but sometimes it's, you know, is it this month? Is it next month? And so while we might think, oh, it's going to be October, and when it's November, it kind of adjusts a little bit. And so as you look at the cost centers, they're relatively similar to what they were in the first quarter, with some small changes. Administration is projected to be over budget by $27,000, district-wide programs $51,000, general education $66,000, and school facilities $143,000. And then the driver of the deficit, as we can all see, is the special education costs of being over budget by $490,000. So the administration cost center actually improved slightly versus first quarter, and you know, we did see some small savings in some budget lines, but the main driver of that is our unemployment expenditures have kind of leveled off. We had a couple bills that were incredibly high, and now the past few have kind of gotten to a more steady state. So That's why that got improved a bit. The district-wide is, it's really technology costs and trying to control what we're spending there, whether it's supplies or instructional technology, really just getting only what is absolutely necessary. General education, a main driver of this is some turnover. So, naturally, if we've had some turnover and someone left at a higher salary, we bring someone in at a little bit lower salary. We do see some budget savings there. We have had the substitutes have actually been a little bit better than I would have anticipated. I don't want to say that too loudly because that could change tomorrow, especially with what's been going around. And then, materials and supplies. I mean, those aren't large budgets by any means, but truly people are, asking me whether they can buy Scotch tape. So we're being really, really tight because there are only so many lines that we have control over. So we are trying to do our best where we possibly can. School facilities right now is projected to finish under budget. I talked about this in the Q1 projection. This can fluctuate really because we have so many buildings, so many different small repairs can happen, and we did have some small repairs happening across the buildings. So that could swing. At this point, though, all of our custodial positions that we are going to fill are filled. So they are fully staffed to what the level with which the facilities director is going to staff them, and then we use contracted cleaning for some services as well. The special education cost center, I did speak about this, I think, when we mentioned the Q1, but our circuit breaker this year is a little bit better than we anticipated. So that is helping to offset some of these unbudgeted tuitions. That number would be much higher than 490, but we're getting about 300,000 more this year in circuit breaker than we had budgeted. But, and this 490 number could...
When it gets transferred to us.
The circuit breaker?
Yeah.
That's just our revenue coming in
okay.
from circuit breaker. At this time, as we stand today, I do anticipate using the special education reserve fund to fund this deficit. However, if the town does appropriate the Chapter 70 money and the homeless transportation money to us, that's about $200,000. So if that does occur, then I don't, at least today, anticipate needing to dip into the special education reserve fund because we would have that funding to offset the deficit.
So at the sake of beating a dead horse, I know that you say if they fund it as the professional that you are. Mm-hmm. I would say, what do we need to do as a committee to make sure that that is not an if? Do we submit our own article on the next warrant? Why is it even an if?
We've seen the draft article.
We have.
I mean, we've seen the draft article for that warrant.
Right.
I know, but we could submit our own draft article.
Yep.
It's just got to make it on there, so.
Well, I mean, in the same way that any other citizen's petition
Right.
makes it on there, why aren't we going that route?
Well, ours isn't a citizen's petition, but,
I feel like it's drafted. My concern is, now I'm hearing it's gonna be March, and is March gonna come and it's gonna be too close to
Yeah,
May?
and then it's like, oh, it's May, and then,
That's my only concern.
I think it's going to happen.
Okay, I've never
talked to the
seen
mod-
it drafted.
I talked to the moderator
Okay.
yesterday.
you what?
I talked to we have a school building committee. I just talked to the moderator briefly.
Yeah.
Just sounds
because-
like it's happening.
And because it's drafted, I feel like we're ahead of the game.
Okay.
Can we see a copy of the draft?
You already
You
did.
have a copy in your
Sorry.
emails.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you should.
The one thing I didn't bring up when we discussed the 25 budget, but the timing of this makes things a little awkward for the 25 budget because the additional appropriation at special town meeting of the Chapter 70 money should become our new basis for FY
Right.
'24.
It needed to be baked into this.
Correct, which then increases our basis for '24, which increases if we're trying to stick to a set percent.
So
So should
this
that be
budget,
added in there?
is this budget based on including those numbers?
No,
Oy,
it is not, because at this point, there has not
it's
been a.
wish, it's a wish.
Well, and there hasn't been a finalized, this is the number that's definitively going in the warrant.
Although it has to be known at this point.
I would expect.
Well, it is known, but when you look at it,
No, that,
so this should have another $200,000 in it.
186,000 is the last number that I received, but I don't know
but so
if
that's a really good point. That does have to be in here, otherwise,
We're
it's
at
wrong.
a
It's another
deficit.
cut.
Right, it's wrong for the next year.
It's not necessarily wrong. What it does, though, is it drops the percent increase down. So it's,
Oh.
so, what it does is the 4.6% increase would decrease slightly because your 24 basis.
So we're not looking to spend another 200,000, 186,000. It's that it would change how much in the hole we are, and it would change the percentage increase.
Correct.
Okay.
And sets the correct baseline.
So I think that should be I kind of feel like that there has to be
A note
a note
somewhere.
in there.
Well, so on our budget, I did note it on our budget, on like a number of slides in our budget book. And I'm not comfortable saying what the new 24 number is until it's voted. Because until it's voted and the town has said this is your new basis, I don't want to be basing a budget off of that, because that's not the appropriated budget from the town yet. The 24, our 24 appropriated budget from the town is $31,008,713.
Which is why we wanted this in December.
Partly.
Right, that is
Yeah.
part of why we wanted to
Yeah.
do it earlier than us.
Yeah, I know, I'm looking back at your page 5 on the previous presentation, and I know at the bottom it says, it does not reflect any increases to appropriations. That feels like it's a little tucked away. I'd like to see that a little.
Yellow,
Sounds like a
red,
phone call.
highlighted red.
Yeah.
Stars around
That
it.
sounds like
Or
that
more
has to be-
specifically, this does not include the anticipated $186,000 that we
It's a little
were
benign.
counting on.
It's a little benign, yeah.
What?
It's a little benign.
Yeah, it does. It feels a little benign.
I completely agree with you, Joe.
Does that have to be a special, like a separate conversation between you and somebody from,
I don't know, because you have tried to bring it up.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, what I will say is, at the end of the day, if the budget that the committee puts forth is 5.1%, is 5.1, the number that you're putting forth for 25 is the number.
The final dollar is the final dollar.
It's not changing for 25.
So we add that 155,000 for whatever, it's like 186.
Right.
So,
It's just, it becomes it depends on the conversation. If the select board and the finance committee accepts 5.1, and that's the budget, right? No issue there. It only comes into play if it says, all right, we want you to, these buckets meet this percent, right? Or this is the percent you need to meet. Then at that point, it comes into the conversation, because it's, okay, fine, but the basis is this number. So if I'm meeting, I'm just gonna make this up, 2.5, it's 2.5 of 31 plus 186, right? And so it's, at this point, it's not imperative. It will only become important depending on how the other committees, select board, finance committee, town administrator, decide to fund the school committee.
right, except that you're living and breathing this, whereas that $186,000 is not top of the page for anybody else, whereas it is for us.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I mean, like, I definitely understand what you're saying in terms of, like, at the bottom line number doesn't change. It's it's the percentage that changes.
Right, but the proper way to budget would to have had all the appropriations in before.
Well, and the reality is that at the end of the day, people are responding to that percentage as opposed to that dollar.
Right.
Correct.
That, like, that's the emotional part of budgeting, is that people will look at that and not look at the 31 million, but the 31,185,000.
So I think these are all really important conversations for perhaps Suzanne to bring up at Tri-Chair, but also to discuss with the other two boards when we're discussing our budget. And I did want to say, typically, we do, I think, the superintendent, I believe school committee attended last year as well, too. We always present to finance committee.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And typically that's in March when we do that. My suggestion would be is to ask that actually be a finance committee select board joint meeting with school committee presenting to them.
And earlier.
And then at that point, you can really have the conversation about this year's budget. Hopefully at that point, we actually know, you would think the special town meeting would be more baked in. And that's one conversation. And then the separate conversation is these bigger picture things, right, that you're having, that takes a lot more work, a lot more coordination.
The big questions.
Right. So I know historically in Swampscott, the school committee is always just presented to finance committee. And in my experience in other communities, it's always been joint with select board. And I do think that if you can make that happen, I do think that would be important.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why it can't happen. No, you have plenty of weeks to set it up and plan it and make sure people can attend.
March might be too late, especially if we're having a special town meeting in March. Maybe it needs to happen in February?
Yeah.
Or is that too soon, or?
I mean, look, we're doing our stuff ahead of time.
Right,
so
right.
And we're doing it ahead of time in order to give us extra time to talk.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, I think it just is a matter of what Suzanne can coordinate.
What you can coordinate.
Right.
With the other two chairs.
I mean, FinCom usually has a very set schedule, so finding a spot in there,
Yeah, no, I think Mr. Hartman seems flexible and amenable to being flexible with his agenda. For sure.
Okay.
All right. My God, is Ms. Mackey-Knowles still here?
Do you guys mind if I scoot out?
No, and I want Noelle to go home and do whatever she has to do. It's 2 hours, that's plenty.
Yeah. All right, Karen needs to leave too.
Guys, I'm also gonna scoot out,
Oh.
unless you need me to stay.
Well, we have an AI presentation from Ms. Mackey-Knowles.
I do wanna say, thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
All right. And so, thank you, Ms. Mackey-Knowles, for being here tonight, and thank you for allowing us to move you on the agenda. We have talked about AI at length, and I believe she'll have permission to share her screen and take us through her presentation. So thank you, Glenn, for staying.
No, this is kind of my idea to begin with, so yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm glad I was here for all that. Cheryl, you're such a great presenter, and I loved hearing Pam talk about all the exciting things ahead. So even though that was heavy and this is a little lighter, it was a good meeting to be at. So we met back in May, and in May we introduced the idea of AI in education and how fast and furious it was coming. So this is an update of where we are now, and where we need to get before we can really be cooking with fire, as they say. So right now, at this point, since May, we've offered some staff PD for administrators, teachers, counselors. We're working on drafting guidelines to go for our responsible use policy, which needs a major update in the age of AI. So that's something I need to get on the schedule with the school committee and the policy subcommittee. We created a very nice AI dashboard resources for all of our educators. That's this right here, and they can go and sort by the tool, what it could be for. We're working on linking different tasks and who could use it, and what type of resources, and if it's approved. So this is a work in progress, but every time we get resources, we've been putting them in this dashboard. And staff are in their departments talking about student use, and we'll get more into that later. Now with students, teachers are definitely talking about it, but there's a lot of rules around the AI tools. In general, almost all tools are restricted under the age of 13, and that has to do with a lot of the state and federal laws that we'll talk about as well. So students over 13 can use a lot of AI tools, so we're really concentrating on SHS, and Natalie at the middle school, she's concentrating on her 8th grade, so she's teaching a little bit about machine learning, so that's coming up too. We are presenting in a handful of classrooms to assist teachers when they ask us and say, hey, this unit has something that has to do with AI or generative text, can you come help with that? So I've done a couple of them, and what I've learned was surprising. Today I actually had a conversation in the hallway with a student too, and they don't seem to be using ChatGPT or Bard. Bard is blocked because it's an 18+, and that's a Google product. And so Google said, this isn't safe for the kids, and this is big data saying that, so there's something to be said about this. ChatGPT is open for the high school students to explore right now because we're still in our exploratory phase, and Canva, which has an AI. But there's a ton of tools that are popping up daily. What I found from the students is most of them are just learning about AI with the My AI and Snapchat. So I linked that in the presentation if you're a parent. Really interesting to see that there is an AI in Snapchat that you can ask to like plan your day and help you write your snaps and some more things. And that's only available on personal devices. We've also presented at a lot of big conferences, MassQ to the Western Mass Counselors Association, and we're constantly learning more every day. So one of the tools, before we go in there, that I just wanted to point out, this is something that teachers are loving. This is Magic School. This is, it's got like ChatGPT sort of in the background, but it puts it in the framework of what a teacher might need. And this is really helpful in an era where we are getting possibly new literacy programs and teachers are learning how to teach things. They do come as the whole package, but teachers enjoy putting their spin on all of their lessons. One of the ones that I love right now for leveling is the text leveler, and you can ask for an exemplar. But so it's saying 5th grade, it puts in all this text about reading, and then you ask it to summarize it, or you can say, can you put this down at a different level for reading? And it will do that. So that's really, really helpful. All right, so back to our presentation. So looking at AI, where we came from, we're still here. We're in between stage 1 and 2. We are still creating policies and guidance around this to address those risks. And we're looking at our organizational learning. We're definitely not an improvement and transformation yet. So we see where we are. We're making little tiny small investments and we're learning more about it. And from the workshops and things, there's still some fear. And we keep iterating that education is, with AI, is about personalized learning for the student and helping them to get that personalized tutor that they might need, especially if we have teachers in larger class sizes and you can't get around to everyone, and a student goes home and they're not exactly clear on the material. So what could you do? You can ask any of these generative texts to explain things in different terms for deeper understanding. So I do have a study that I link later that is showing how students who are using and asking artificial intelligence for help with math are actually improving their SAT scores. So there's a really neat scientific study on that. We're also looking at teachers being able to help with differentiation. And we say, take away your initiation fatigue. You've got a task, you have all these students coming in and you think about the materials you have prepared. You need to help differentiate for some different levels. You can also help with language translation. So there's a whole bunch of options and we're trying to push that because we still have the idea that we're going to replace teachers and that no one else will be using it except for kids to cheat. And it's a separate subject that they have to teach. It's adding more to their course load. So we're concentrating more on that we need to teach AI literacy. So I was talking to Natalie Poverchuk about this today, and she was talking about how in 8th grade she teaches machine learning and introduced like the AI literacy. And we're talking about how early do we have to go with this. So there's a lot of states and countries now that are sponsoring all this research and lesson plans for schools around AI, and they're starting even in kindergarten with what happens when you talk to Hey Siri or Hey Alexa. So looking at AI literacy, like how is AI working, how is artificial intelligence working, and then integrating that with our computer science right now. So we already have some machine learning inside the computer science standards, but this is the way that in the places that it is and where it should live in our curriculum. And we shouldn't just be isolating it. You should know a little bit about how it works before you're using it. One of the big concerns that's coming up for us is this going to widen the digital divide? So if I remember presenting to school committee about 6 years ago, and I was saying, you know, not one-to-one, one-to-world. And we're going to get all these computers because there's a huge digital divide with people that don't have devices at home. And now we think about how there's computers and internet everywhere. So what is the new one? It's about if we're going to block this and we're going to stop all of our students in the education of it, or if we're going to embrace it and say, you need to learn about this, because yes, it is dangerous in some ways. It's really helpful. But the future, they were saying it's going to take 50 years before it conquers the human brain, and now they're saying by 2027, AI might take over the world. So there's a lot of scary things coming up for people that don't. Everyone okay there? I can't actually see you all, so. Looking at, when we look at AI, we look at it this way. Right now, people are saying, how do we stop kids from cheating? But there's an opportunity here. How can we use AI tools to improve education? We don't think AI is going to replace teachers. We just need to rethink education in the age of AI. So we're doing that right now because we have so many things that just happen automatically with updates, like Google Translate. We have it on, but if you make a test the wrong way, if you hover over the word, it will translate for you in Google. So we need to rethink, like, okay, if we can just translate a word, and we can't just turn that off for some people because it's really a benefit for our English language learners, then how do we do this better? Do we have texts and images of a word on a quiz so that it can translate? Or do we do paper-based, or do we think, do we need word-to-word translation? Should we instead be saying, like, read this paragraph in the other language and respond to it? And that is happening, but we're at the lower levels here, where we're talking about one-to-one translation. So rethinking how we're teaching. So this here sort of captures all of the spectrum. I linked the study in here with the personalized learning assistance with math, education, large language models, and how it was increasing SAT scores. I thought that was a real promise, and obviously that was funded by Microsoft Research, and they do have a stake in the game. But thinking about all the benefits that we have, there are risks, and as long as we continue to say these are the risks, and we're still speaking with teachers about this, because teachers, they're in two camps. There's the benefit camp and there's the risk camp. And the risk camp is very tough to change their mind because they need all the time to change their teaching resources, because this is the way that they've been teaching forever, and now some of the questions that they could ask can be answered. So a lot of the staff have already transitioned back to in-person assessments where they're in paper or they're in front of a teacher that can see their computer screen. A lot of my concern comes from student privacy and unauthorized data collection, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But thinking about all that, where are we? Where are we going? We're developing language for syllabus. We're reviewing what we allow and block, because each day new AI tools pop up, and some aren't allowed for students under 18. We have to protect them. That's our job. And we need to revise our responsible use policy. So I've been working on that, but we'll need some staff input and school committee, and we'll be looking at that in all of our different levels with leadership, central office. To continue offering PD on the half Wednesdays to staff on tools they can use. I've been really pushing Magic School, ChatGPT, and Bard more so to take away the burden of some of the routine tasks, but also so that they know what's out there and the potential. If they understand how to use it, then they may not be so afraid of it, and what students might use it for. And today, the student in the hall that I was talking with said that they asked ChatGPT for ideas for a potential project they wanted to research. And that was it. And they said it was really informative. To me, that's how back in the day we would be like, oh, I'm going to Google this and see what's out there. So it was a different way because it came up very formalized with different project ideas. So I thought that was a pretty cool use case. And we're going to review the privacy policy of tools because teachers get very excited with tools. We want them to have the agency in their classroom and the autonomy to be able to use tools, but we have to continue to say you have to protect student data privacy. We can't just use it because it's free. Students need to learn how to use AI in an ethical manner. So thinking about that, what will our guidelines be? What does that mean to use it ethically? Is it okay to have ChatGPT write your entire paper? No. Is it okay for ChatGPT to explain to you the themes that are inside a book because you read the book and you still just want to make sure that you know what you're writing your essay on? Yes. But how do we cite that? So looking at our guidelines, our expectations, and what they can use it under 18. And we'll continue to push into classes when requested. And then we're looking at all of our guidelines and then revising the RUP. So that would be where we're going. This would be like some of the sample student agreements. They're pretty basic. I'm going to use them responsibly and not in a way that could harm myself, because examining Snapchat, there's definitely some places for harm. And only using AI to support my learning, following my school's rules, teachers' instructions. I'll be honest, I won't turn in work that's fully created by AI as my own. So, and for a syllabus, a teacher may say, you can use this for brainstorming, you can start your research, but you cannot complete assignments without proper citation. If you pass it off as your own, that's plagiarism. That's an important point. And this is how we should be starting off strong in the fall. So thinking about the privacy piece, we have some permission slip ideas if we want to allow the whole district to have access to ChatGPT. This is a link here, thinking about FERPA, and that if we use ChatGPT, we have to teach students that you can't put in like your name, your social security number, and then ask it like to open a credit card for you. So these are the things that we worry about because they're so used to asking these bots to do little things for them around the house. Like when you hear them say like, hey Alexa, they grow up with it. And little kids are always ordering stuff off Amazon. So how do we use these appropriately? This is just a slide with some relevant policies that we think about all day long. FERPA, COPPA, IDA, SEPA is huge. This is the one where we get E-rate money taken away if we don't have a content filter. And so this is why we have our Go Guardian. So these all apply to what we're doing here with thinking about AI plus all of the other policies that we have in technology. So that is where we are. It's a little update.
Any school committee questions? Thank you, Lytania. Always informative, but I'm sure there's some questions.
If I could start, first of all, Lytania, this was awesome. This is exactly what I was hoping you would do, just to kind of educate the board about this tool that is just growing in leaps and bounds every day. I'm ecstatic that you talked about the privacy. I mean, even on a professional level, we worry every day about the privacy. You know, if you know, what can we borrow and what do we have to cite? This is great. I'm really excited about the work that you and your team are doing with the staff, and I really thank you for this.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Carrie O'Donnell, she's digital learning manager, and she is the privacy ninja. She signs agreements with companies, examines them, and pays attention to software, and makes sure that she executes the privacy piece of, we pay a collaborative a very little amount a year. It's like under $3,000. And they vet all the vendors in Massachusetts, and we work with like big schools, our friends at Newton, Natick, Watertown, all the big districts. And if they're selling our student data, we have an attorney that's going to fight for us. So they have to change how they do business with us, almost every single company that we use. And if we can't get an agreement with them, then we do something with, like a personal permission slip, which Joe Dulett, like he has tiny little software that his students use to get work. And it says, we won't sign your school agreement, but it has its own privacy policy. But everything's really vetted well. And that's the thing with AI, is everything you put into ChatGPT, Bard, all of these programs, if you put in a student's name and you put in any information, that's out there, and they can do whatever they want with it. There's zero agreement.
Right. I mean, and even to the point of, you know, there are AI tools for photographs, to clean them, to put images where images never belonged before. So this was great. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Lytania.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because Midjourney we're not really talking about yet, but that's the type of thing where you could say, I want to see Glenn Pastor riding a unicorn to town hall. And it created if Glenn was a celebrity. And so somebody had a deep fake of pictures of war with Hello Kitty tanks and guns, and it just created it. So you can ask it to create anything, and we're also talking, Joe Dulett's been educating his students about deep fakes. Like we can take the superintendent's voice from tonight, a photo of her or a video that she gave publicly, we can make it say whatever we want. So you cannot trust videos anymore, and you can't trust photos.
Right. You know, just to that point, if you were to call, and I believe they've finally stopped doing it now, if you were to call Fidelity Investments, let's say, to check on your retirement account, they would base your footprint and your ID on your voice, and that they had to change because of some of the technology that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I just want to say, I appreciate you demystifying this, especially with our educators. You know, as a parent of a high schooler, this has been a conversation that I've had with Mr. Kohut, you know, in terms of how do we get ahead of this and make this so that it's not about cheating, but about, you know, making good use of it. So to hear that our educators are interested in getting ahead of that is exciting for me, and, you know, just sort of a testament to who they are, and I appreciate you doing the work with that, so thank you.
Thank you.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks, Lytania.
All right, see y'all soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
No, thanks. Scary.
It's wild.
Crazy. All right, so do you have anything else for the superintendent's report?
I do not.
Yahoo! And school committee update, chair, we sort of talked about that little across the evening, so there's nothing to update. Is there a bargaining update?
Is there a bargaining update? No, we're all just plodding along. It's
Plodding along.
Yeah, you know, it's working with the, you know, the tutors, you know, because it's a brand new, process, it just is taking longer, I think, than it might have otherwise, but I think we're getting there.
I saw that you had a question about the teachers and the ESPs getting on the same cycle.
Yes.
I mean, I think we're all in agreement that we did talk about that. Is there work to be done for that?
No, in fact, we had made a proposal for a multi-year contract, and that was rejected based on it moving outside of the schedule.
Oh.
And at the time, Margaret Ardman said, well, this is based on the agreement that we came to during the teacher negotiations, which was to get everything onto the same track. And that was that's what prompted my email to just say, does anybody remember this? Because I just didn't. So I was glad that everybody was in agreement that, in fact, she's right, and we'll wind up with it on the same track. That just, it shocked me at first, because I just thought, oh, you know, negotiating 3 contracts at the same time is going to be heavy lifting, but it's heavy lifting no matter what.
True. And so now we're at public comment. We had a lot of discussion about the budget and then that AI presentation. So if there's anyone who's watching that would like to say anything, just raise your hand and I'll allow you to talk. And I see no one in the room either. All right, so on to our actions and votes. We have 2 donations. They're both great. One is for software to support the robotics team for $1,000. And the other one is for high school banners in the gym in memory of Jack Hughes. I don't have the amounts in front of me. Let me just open that up. We just vote on the amounts, or we just vote on? Sorry, you guys.
The robotics is for $1,000,
Right.
and the banners are for $2,107.
I will make a motion,
$2,107. Yeah, so I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept those 2 gifts.
Great, a second that? Second. There's 3 of us. All right, all those in favor?
We
Oh,
should
we'll do a roll call
since-
because
yeah.
you're on Zoom. Sorry, Glenn?
That's okay. Yes, for me.
Amy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So again, that was just generous. It's always so nice to have these donations. And then we come to the consent agenda, which is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business of the district. The school committee may adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion. At the request of any committee member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion. We just have 2 items. They happen to be regular session minutes, one from December 2nd and one from December 14th.
December 6th.
Oh, sorry, December 6th. Thank you.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
And all those in favor, Glenn?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, John.
Yes.
Susanna Z. All right, you guys, I'm
ready.
at a double hit. I'm like, A. You
Hold
guys are
on,
on my left side.
just finish it. Say yes.
Oh, yes, I said yes,
Okay,
sorry.
the motion.
Okay, you're on my left side and I have ear infections. My ear's blocked.
So you should be
So
sitting there so
I'm
you can
differently
read lips.
able tonight, and I'm doing a great job.
You are. You are.
Does someone want to make?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right. John, go with the second. Glenn, you okay with adjourning?
I am fine with adjourning.
All right, so moved.
Yes.
We're all,
Yeah, okay.
meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night. Enjoy your time,
luck.
Glenn.
Thank you.